Is it possible that the deepest secrets of our past are not buried in the earth beneath our feet, but written in the distant, icy darkness of space? We live on a planet governed by relentless cycles: the day, the year, the precession of the equinoxes. We are comfortable with the rhythm of predictable time. But what if there is a far greater, much slower cosmic clock ticking down toward a restart, a catastrophic reset that our history has diligently tried to erase? For millennia, we have interpreted the cosmos through the filtered lens of science and myth, separating the quantifiable truth from the convenient fiction. Yet sometimes, the sky sends us a messenger so anomalous, so foreign to our known understanding, that those two categories collapse entirely, forcing us to ask, is this the gravitational echo of an ancient, forgotten history? Right now, something monumental is happening at the very edge of our solar system, an event tracked by observatories like ATLAS, the Asteroid Terrestrial Impact Last Alert System. Their focus has typically been on mundane, predictable threats, but in the depths of space, they have recently tracked a specific object, the highly unusual long-period comet known as 3I Atlas. This is not just another icy wanderer. Its trajectory is radically different. Its composition suggests an origin far beyond the conventional Oort cloud, perhaps even interstellar, or, more chillingly, from the very furthest reaches of a cyclical orbit that dominates our entire system's gravitational dynamics. Its sudden visibility, coupled with its immense velocity and its highly unusual chemical signature, has caused a subtle yet profound unease among serious astronomical researchers. It behaves less like a random traveler and more like a scout, a cosmic particle flung inward by the gravitational wake of something incomparably larger and more massive, currently lurking in the unfathomable darkness beyond Pluto. This observation serves as our modern anchor to an idea that has been dismissed for centuries as fringe paranoia or ancient allegory, the Nibiru cycle. We are talking about the potential restart of the immense thousands of years-long orbit of the elusive Planet X, a celestial body whose very existence is still fiercely debated in mainstream science, yet whose descriptive details saturate the oldest written records of human civilization. If 3I Atlas is indeed a harbinger, propelled or influenced by the return of this large, dark planet, then we are not just witnessing a random astronomical event. We are watching the slow, inexorable turning of the great cosmic wheel, the signal for the return of a lineage tied inextricably to that very planet, the Anunnaki. To begin to understand the true weight of this potential return, we must leave the sanitized halls of modern academia and venture back into the cracked clay and indelible scripts of Sumer. How is it possible that a civilization, often credited with the invention of the wheel and basic agriculture, possessed detailed cosmological knowledge describing a 12th celestial body in our system, a knowledge that modern science, equipped with satellite imaging and deep space probes, has only tentatively confirmed through gravitational calculations? This paradox is the first threshold we must cross. The Sumerians did not merely hypothesize, they recorded. They etched into cuneiform tablets the stories of the Dingir, the righteous ones of the rockets, who descended from this returning planet, Nibiru, often translating directly as the planet of the crossing. These records are not simple mythology. They are dense, detailed narratives of genetic engineering, resource extraction, and the deliberate shaping of early human consciousness. The uncomfortable recognition that dawns upon the sincere observer is that this might not be myth at all, but a historical record of cosmic colonization, preserved in fragments across epochs. It requires a different kind of attention to piece these fragments together, to allow the whispers of ancient history and the cold facts of current astronomy to converge. If you find yourself sensing that the narrative of human history you were taught is incomplete, If you feel a stirring of something vast and unrecognized beneath the surface of current events, then you are ready to delve deeper into this investigation. The only way to understand the full implications of what Three-Eye Atlas might be signaling is to follow this thread of forgotten knowledge, to compare the astronomical observations with the forbidden texts. Take a moment to settle your mind, to prepare for a paradigm shift that will challenge everything you thought you knew about our origins. I invite you to join this inquiry, to absorb every detail as we lay bare the foundation of this cyclical return. If this exploration resonates with the deep intuition that there is more to our reality, share your thoughts in the comments below using the phrase, "The cycle turns." Your engagement is essential, for this is a story not just about the past, but about our collective future, and it demands our full, undivided focus. The deep, unsettling strangeness of Three-Eye Atlas is only amplified when we consider the gravitational environment it suggests. Scientists are primarily focused on the potential impact risk, but the trajectory speaks louder than the risk itself. This comet is moving along a path that suggests it has been shepherded by an enormous, unseen hand, a gravitational influence so profound that it distorts the predictable orbital plane of our outer solar system. This is the very influence predicted by astronomers seeking Planet X long before any ancient texts were considered. They sought the missing mass necessary to explain the peculiar clustered orbits of distant trans-Neptunian objects. This invisible force, this vast celestial body, known in Sumerian as Nibiru, operates on an elliptical orbit estimated to take anywhere from 3,600 to 4,000 years to complete one full revolution around our sun. Imagine a clock whose hour hand moves once every 4 millennia. We are now, according to the ancient markers and potentially according to the latest astronomical data, approaching the moment when that hand sweeps back towards the inner solar system. This convergence point is what the ancient scribes termed the crossing. But why does this matter beyond mere cosmology? Because the return of Nibiru is intrinsically linked to the history and presence of the Anunnaki. These beings, often depicted as magnificent, large stature, long-lived and technologically superior, were not mythological gods in the Greek or Roman sense. They were depicted as working, governing, and crucially needing resources. Their mission, as detailed in the Epic of Atrahasis and other foundational texts, was driven by a need for materials, specifically gold, necessary to repair or maintain the atmosphere of their home planet, Nibiru. The cycle, therefore, is not just a cosmic loop, it is a logistical schedule. The return of their planet brings them back into close proximity to Earth, making deep space travel unnecessary for their periodic visitation and supervision of their terrestrial operations. This recognition generates deep philosophical discomfort. We are asked to accept that our earliest civilizations, those credited with the spark of human ingenuity, were perhaps the byproduct of an intervention, a controlled experiment managed by highly advanced celestial observers. The Anunnaki, according to the tablets, engineered Homo sapiens by combining their own essence with early hominid DNA to create a workforce, the Lulu Amalu, specifically to mine the resources they required. If this is true, then our entire history is built upon a profound and deliberate act of genetic manipulation, and our current state of technological advancement is a delayed echo of their own lost science. The ensuing silence that followed their last departure, the great amnesia that wiped this knowledge from common discourse, is perhaps the most strategic piece of this puzzle. It suggests a purposeful veil drawn over human memory, or perhaps a natural consequence of the devastating global upheavals that often coincided with Nibiru's closest passage. The gravitational turbulence caused by a body of that mass disrupting the inner solar system would unleash cataclysmic events, flooding, crustal displacement, seismic chaos. It is easy to forget a history when the civilization that recorded it is drowned beneath global tides and tectonic shifts. But the memory, like the planet itself, remains dormant, residing in the deepest archaeological layers and the most cryptic astronomical signals. We are now faced with the possibility that the sighting of 3I Atlas, that distant flickering point of light, is the first tangible sign that this veil is lifting. It is the beginning of the gravitational reverberation, the subtle stirring of the long-sleeping mechanism. The implication is staggering. The technology, the knowledge, and perhaps the beings themselves associated with the original creation of human civilization are once again approaching the threshold of our orbital domain. This is the moment where the whispers of Sumerian antiquity demand to be heard as current scientific warnings. The urgency intensifies as we begin to map the theoretical trajectory of Nibiru against historical records of global catastrophe. Every cycle seems marked by a significant leap in human development, followed by a sudden, devastating collapse. Are these merely coincidences, or evidence of repeated intervention and subsequent cleanup? The fact that 3I Atlas has been observed shattering into fragments, an unusual behavior for a comet of its size, suggests it is reacting to immense and irregular forces that mainstream models struggle to account for. It is less a sign of arrival and more a sign of the immense gravitational field it is currently traversing, a field that is itself now beginning to perturb the delicate balance of the inner solar system. The sheer density of this long-lost visitor means that its gravitational influence extends millions of miles ahead of its visible mass, reaching out like a silent, powerful hand. The reckoning of time is upon us, forcing us to reconcile the deep time scale of astronomical cycles with the fleeting lifespan of humanity. The full implications of the Anunnaki's forbidden past, their true purpose, their identity, and the covenant they established with early humanity cannot be fully grasped until we understand the nature of the great orbital clock that governs their existence. The journey ahead will require us to look through the eyes of the ancient observers, those who left behind not just records, but subtle warnings embedded within the foundations of our culture. We are now standing at the very beginning of the convergence, where the celestial mechanics of Comet 3I Atlas force us to confront the inheritance left behind by the architects of dust. We must now turn our focus directly to those original forbidden texts, those clay tablets that hold the complete, unedited narrative of the Anunnaki and the precise reasons why their cycle is restarting right now. This is only the beginning of our deep dive into the hidden history of humanity, a history written in the gravity of a returning world. If the celestial sphere holds secrets, they are not etched on dusty relics, but coded in the cold mathematics of returning orbits. What we observe today, whether it is the unusual, almost arrogant trajectory of an object like 3I Atlas, or the shifting gravitational nuances of the Kuiper Belt, forces us to confront a profound possibility that the human perception of time, this fragile linearity we rely upon, is merely a brief interruption within a cosmic cycle that dwarfs our entire recorded history. We often speak of historical epochs, of the Bronze Age or the Renaissance, measuring time in centuries or millennia. But the cycle we are investigating, the purported circuit of Nibiru, demands a scale so vast it challenges our fundamental understanding of permanence and change. We are talking about periods that extend well beyond the 12,000 years since the last great thaw, pushing into the deep time that shaped our planetary environment itself. Imagine for a moment that history is not a straight line ascending toward progress, but rather a compressed spring, coiled and released by external gravitational forces. What if the most pivotal moments of human advancement, and conversely, our greatest civilizational collapses, were not purely endogenous events, not just social revolutions or geological accidents, but synchronous consequences of this massive planetary return? This is where the ancient Sumerian records, often dismissed as fanciful mythology, begin to gain a chilling technical weight. They describe a celestial entity, known sometimes as Nibiru, sometimes as Marduk, not as a god born of spiritual fervor, but as a disruptive gravitational architect whose presence restructured the solar system and critically initiated contact with humanity. The meticulousness with which the Sumerians detailed the orbital mechanics of their cosmos is perhaps the most disquieting element of their legacy. They possessed knowledge, such as the exact number of bodies in the solar system, the orbital paths of Uranus and Neptune, and the precession of the equinoxes, that our own modern science only rediscovered centuries after the invention of the telescope. Where did this foundational knowledge come from? It is far too precise, too integrated, to be the accidental musing of early agriculturalists observing the nearby stars. It suggests a complete, handed-down cosmology, an inheritance of highly advanced celestial navigation. If we accept the premise that this knowledge was inherited, we must then accept the identity of the alleged instructors, the Anunnaki, those who from heaven to earth came. Their appearance, according to the tablets, was directly tied to the proximity of their home world, the very definition of a cyclical, scheduled intervention. To label the Anunnaki simply as mythological figures is to ignore the complex, administrative context in which they are presented. They are described with hierarchical ranks, specialized tasks, mining operations, and even internal conflicts, details far too intricate for simple deity worship. They were, in essence, colonists whose presence was transient, defined by the orbital mechanics that brought them close to Earth. The forbidden past we speak of is not just the existence of a massive, undiscovered planet, but the reality that our civilization might be the result of deliberate yet intermittent stewardship, a forgotten project, periodically checked upon. And if that project has a cyclical monitoring schedule, the current astronomical anomalies, the strange signatures detected in the outer reaches of the Oort cloud, the perturbations leading to the ongoing hypothesis of Planet 9, and now the uniquely angled appearance of objects like 3I Atlas may not be random cosmic noise. They could be the unmistakable gravitational echoes announcing the approaching realignment. The true moment of recognition dawns when we look beyond the modern dismissal of Zecharia Sitchin's work and examine the core thesis itself, that historical flood myths, present across virtually every independent culture globally, are not merely tales of localized rainfall, but traumatic records of cataclysmic shifts caused by the gravitational influence of a passing planetary mass. The restart of the Nibiru cycle, therefore, implies a return to those conditions. It is the cosmic clock striking midnight again, wiping clean the slate of superficial historical markers and returning to the base code of terrestrial mechanics. The feeling that something is profoundly out of place in our solar system, the gravitational anomalies, the unexplained velocity changes, the deep space signals, becomes less a scientific mystery and more an unsettling confirmation that the cosmic mechanism, once understood by the ancients, is winding up for its next great performance. We must remember that every advanced civilization leaves markers. If the Anunnaki were here, aligned with their returning world, their legacy would be twofold: profound knowledge and profound destruction. The knowledge is coded into Sumerian mathematics and astronomy. The destruction is etched into global geology and preserved in the universal flood narratives. This juxtaposition is what makes the historical record forbidden. It suggests that the greatest secrets of our past are not found in our terrestrial conflicts, but in our relationship to the sky, a relationship controlled by an immense, unseen gravitational puppeteer. If we accept the potential reality of this cosmic arrangement, then our current search for the theoretical Planet 9 shifts dramatically from an abstract scientific exercise to an urgent existential attempt to locate a scheduled visitor whose last arrival coincided with world-ending events. But let us pause here, allowing this immense perspective shift to settle. If you find yourself following this trail of astronomical data and ancient prophecy, realizing the sheer complexity of connecting these disparate threads across millennia, then you are engaging with history on a level that demands profound attention. This isn't passive viewing, this is detective work into the origins of human consciousness. If the weight of this inquiry resonates with you, I encourage you to hit the like button as a signal, a confirmation that this dialogue between science and forgotten history is necessary. And if you have insights, fragments of historical lore, or astronomical data that deepen this emerging picture, share them in the comments below. We are assembling a mosaic of the past and the future, piece by meticulous piece. Subscribing ensures you do not miss the next critical chapter in this unfolding investigation, for the layers of denial surrounding the Anunnaki's legacy are dense, and peeling them back requires steady, shared focus. The deep skepticism surrounding the Nibiru theory often stems from a reluctance to accept the core implication that Earth is not isolated. We are part of a larger, potentially managed system. The Sumerians called the Anunnaki shining ones, or those who monitor. If they monitored, what exactly were they looking for, and why did they leave? The texts suggest their departure was not a voluntary retirement, but a necessity dictated by the changing orbital dynamics. As Nibiru receded into the deepest void, the energy, the connection, the gravitational support for their operations diminished, forcing them to retreat until the next scheduled return, the point we might be approaching now. Consider the psychological barrier this narrative imposes. It shifts our view of creation from random chance or singular divine intervention to a recurring, technologically driven process. The forbidden past is forbidden because it undermines our self-proclaimed autonomy. It suggests that the sophisticated infrastructure we inherited, the rapid leap from simple villages to organized cities with complex legal and administrative codes, was facilitated, perhaps even jump-started, by external intervention during a specific window of astronomical opportunity. And the key variable defining that window is the orbital proximity of Nibiru. If 3I Atlas is indeed a related artifact, perhaps a gravitational precursor or a long-range scout signaling the gravitational change, its existence validates the cyclical timeline laid out in clay tablets 4,000 years ago. The density of ancient myths concerning watchers or fallen angels must also be re-evaluated under this cosmic light. Are these merely moral allegories or distorted memories of overseers who interacted closely with early humanity, transferring knowledge perhaps too quickly, disrupting the natural course of our evolution? The forbidden element might reside less in the fact of their existence and more in the realization of their technological superiority and the non-negotiable terms of their cyclical interaction. If they return not as saviors, but as administrators resuming control over a long-term project. This perspective raises immediate, pressing questions about the current state of our civilization. Are we prepared for a potential return, not just astrophysically, but sociologically? Do the world powers, which certainly monitor deep space objects with greater scrutiny than they publicly admit, possess internal, classified knowledge that aligns with the Anunnaki cyclical model? The silence surrounding true deep space anomalies is deafening, often replaced by vague, reassuring terminology. But the universe is not always reassuring, and the cyclical nature of history, as recorded by those who lived through the last planetary visitation, speaks of chaos, upheaval, and reconstruction under duress. The gradual revelation here is that the past is not static. It is kinetic, constantly influencing the future through predictable, recurring celestial mechanics. We are beginning to see the recognition phase solidify. The Sumerian accounts are not fantasies. They are complex observational records encoded in mythic language. The strangeness of our current astronomical environment is simply the physics of a multi-body solar system reasserting itself. The tension now builds toward the crucial stage of confirming the trajectory. If the Nibiru cycle is truly restarting, we must identify the precise mechanism of its approach and, more importantly, understand the specific intentions of those associated with its arrival. We need to look closely at the geological signatures of the last cycle's end, seeking empirical proof of the cataclysmic events that were the Anunnaki's farewell signature. Our next step in this journey requires us to descend further into the Sumerian archives, examining the specific, terrifying predictions left behind regarding the next contact. Predictions that involve not just massive shifts in ocean levels, but profound alterations to the magnetic field and, crucially, to the human genetic blueprint itself. If the Anunnaki's forbidden past is being uncovered by the faint light of an approaching cosmic object, we must now ask, what exact celestial alignment, what specific date did the observers of Sumer predict would signal the definitive end of the current long count and the restart of their governing cycle? Let us turn our attention now to the ancient observatories, meticulously preserved not in stone, but in complex linguistic ciphers, to decode the time remaining before the shadow of Nibiru crosses our path once more. What if the most profound scientific discoveries are not revelations of the new, but merely reminders of the forgotten? We stand at a precipice, looking out into the silent, cold architecture of space, attempting to reconcile the chaotic, almost reckless trajectory of 3I Atlas with the meticulous, cyclical calendars etched into the clay thousands of years ago. We have established that the mere presence of such an interloper, a cosmic visitor, seemingly originating from a point outside the usual plane, serves as a celestial punctuation mark. But what exactly is being punctuated? The profound, chilling suggestion we must now confront is that this object, this wandering sentinel, is not just a random piece of space debris flung inwards by some distant gravitational perturbation. Instead, it acts as a subtle, almost clandestine beacon, signaling the return to a specific chronological marker. This brings us back, inescapably, to the concept of the Nibiru cycle, the Sa of the Sumerians. 3,600 years. It is a period so vast that it dwarfs the lifespan of empires, yet it is precise enough to define the entire span of recorded human history, repeated only a handful of times since the dawn of civilization as we understand it. To the modern astronomer, 3,600 years represents a lengthy orbital period for a hypothetical planet X. To the historian of ancient Mesopotamia, it represents the exact interval between the major epochs of intervention and influence attributed to the Anunnaki. We must consider the terrifying symmetry. If the Anunnaki were indeed tied to a massive planet, Nibiru, whose orbit defined their access to our world, then their entire operational calendar, their schedules of arrival and departure, their very reason for interacting with humanity, would be mathematically dictated by this cycle. They were not merely visitors, they were timekeepers, governed by an orbital clock of unimaginable scale. The moment we begin to detect anomalous gravitational or visual signals, like the peculiar path of 3I Atlas or other deep space perturbations observed over the last several decades, we are effectively witnessing the first audible tick of a clock that had long fallen silent. The density of this correlation is what truly generates unease. It is easy to dismiss one data point, but when the astronomical anomaly aligns with the mythological structure, and that mythological structure dictates a fixed timeline for planetary return, the rational mind begins to buckle. Why would the ancient peoples, who could not possibly possess the sophisticated mathematics required to model a Kuni object's trajectory or an eccentric, highly elliptical orbit, be so focused on a 3,600-year span, correlating catastrophic global shifts with the presence of a heavenly body designated as the crossing? The answer, whispered through the cuneiform tablets, is that this knowledge was not discovered, but implanted. It was part of the legacy, or perhaps the coded instruction set left behind by the Anunnaki. If they were the architects of our earliest civilizations, establishing the foundational structures of law, governance, and metallurgy, then the most critical piece of information they would need to transmit was the schedule of their return. The Nibiru cycle wasn't merely a geological event. It was a societal reset button, a cosmic appointment ingrained into the very architecture of human consciousness and history. The forbidden past of the Anunnaki, which Three Eye Atlas seems to be uncovering, is not necessarily about what they did while they were here, but rather why they had to leave, and why their return is viewed with such trepidation in subsequent mythologies. The Sumerian accounts often focus on the grandeur and power of these beings, the Shems, who commanded flying chariots and constructed vast cities. But a deeper reading reveals fractures, conflicts among the gods, a forbidden knowledge concerning humanity's true potential, and ultimately, a great flood, a global cataclysm that seems to have marked the end of one great Nibiru cycle and the beginning of the long period of relative silence. The true secret, perhaps, is the trauma associated with the previous return. If the cycle is restarting, it means the conditions that prevailed 3,600 years ago are returning. We are not just anticipating a reunion, we are potentially setting the stage for a recurrence of the pressures, the rivalries, and the existential decisions that shaped the early post-Diluvian world. The Anunnaki's forbidden past might simply be the memory of their own failures, the conflicts that nearly destroyed them, and the civilization they had nurtured. Conflicts whose echoes are found in texts ranging from the Mesopotamian epics to the Book of Genesis. We are forced to observe the universe through a lens of profound duality. On one hand, the cold, empirical data of orbital mechanics, tracking an anomalous path through the blackness. On the other, the profound, resonant echoes of history, documenting the influence of beings whose very existence was predicated on that specific orbit. The connection between the two seems too deliberate, too geometrically perfect to be mere coincidence. The comet Three Eye Atlas, in its strange, looping journey, is illuminating a path that was drawn out millennia ago. A cosmic thread connecting the present generation directly to the creators, the observatories of ancient lore. The sensation this provokes is not one of scientific victory, but of profound metaphysical vulnerability. We have spent millennia convincing ourselves that we are the masters of our domain, the sole drivers of our destiny, only to find the orbital mechanics of deep space whispering that we have an appointment we failed to remember, an historical debt tied to the movement of celestial bodies. If the cycle is indeed restarting, what happens to the narrative of human autonomy? The texts suggest that the restart of the cycle always coincided with monumental societal shifts, the introduction of advanced technologies, sudden changes in climate, and the establishment or collapse of divine kingship. What is happening now? Global destabilization, technological acceleration beyond precedent, and a creeping awareness of cosmic loneliness combined with the faint, unsettling signals coming from the farthest reaches of the solar system. The synchronization is too close for comfort. It begs the question, Are these events merely coinciding, or are they being orchestrated by the approaching gravitational and electromagnetic influence of the returned celestial body? This level of inquiry demands absolute dedication. When faced with evidence this complex, blending deep space physics with ancient cuneiform, we are often tempted to categorize it away, to label it as fiction, pseudoscience, or mere coincidence, and thus shut down the essential conversation. But that is precisely when we must lean in. If these profound parallels between the scientific anomaly and the mythological archive resonate with you, if you feel this intricate, unsettling thread of inquiry deserves deeper scrutiny, this is where your sustained presence matters. Take a moment to acknowledge this shared search for the lost origins of our world. Liking the video helps keep this signal strong. Ensuring the algorithms recognize the gravity of this investigation, and joining the channel ensures you are ready for the next phase of the descent, because the information only gets denser, darker, and more challenging from here. We are seeking to reconstruct a narrative that has been systematically erased, and that requires a collective will to remember. The forbidden past is woven into the very fabric of our earliest memories, often disguised as metaphor or exaggerated myth, but the core reality remains. The Anunnaki were here. They departed based on a schedule, and that schedule is now activating again. The question then shifts from if they existed to what their original non-human agenda was, and how our current understanding of the cosmos, limited, three-dimensional, Earth-centric, will withstand the gravitational and conceptual shock of their return. We have only scratched the surface of the Sumerian tablets' true implications. The texts speak not just of the arrival of the Great Ones, but of the specific materials they sought, the specific alterations they made to the human genome, and the highly specific instructions they left regarding stellar alignments and cosmic gates. These are not general tales of ancient gods. They are technical manuals disguised as liturgy, and the most critical instruction of all seems to relate to the preparation for the Tsar's end, the time when the planet, or whatever entity rides its wake, again approaches the inner solar system. Consider the metaphor of the forgotten construction site. Humanity is a magnificent, sprawling structure built millennia ago, but the original blueprints were lost. We inhabit the building, using its rooms, but we don't understand the fundamental purpose of the deepest foundations or the hidden mechanisms within the walls. The Nibiru cycle restarting is like the original builders returning with the master key, reactivating the dormant systems we didn't even know existed. The specific cyclical nature of this presence suggests a type of cosmic farming, a long-term project spanning enormous timescales. If the Anunnaki needed resources or specific conditions, the 3,600-year cycle provided a guaranteed temporal window. But what resources demand such patience? The most unsettling answer found within the coded language of the texts suggests they sought something that required the slow, patient development of a complex ecosystem, humanity itself. This leads us to the heart of the forbidden memory, the true nature of our genesis. If we were engineered, not simply evolved, then the identity of the engineer becomes paramount, and if that engineer operates on a time frame of thousands of years, their current motivations might be wholly alien to our concepts of morality or necessity. The approach of Three-Eye Atlas, this strange, chemically unusual object, is the vanguard, the initial dust mote kicked up by a much larger, unseen procession. It forces us to confront the possibility that the very laws of history and causality we take for granted are merely temporary conditions within a larger cyclical narrative controlled by orbital mechanics and the distant cold intelligence that mastered them. We need to dive deeper into the specific prophetic warnings left behind by the cultures that supposedly interacted most intimately with the Anunnaki. We must isolate the moments where the narrative shifts from reverence to sheer terror. Because if the Nibiru cycle is truly restarting, then the return of the Anunnaki is inextricably linked not just to our beginnings, but potentially to a planned, inevitable conclusion, a cosmic harvest. And understanding that specific agenda, the true nature of their ancient need, is the only way to anticipate the consequences of this orbital convergence. We must now turn our gaze away from the heavens momentarily and focus sharply on the ancient Earth, seeking the physical remnants, the coded warnings, and the true forbidden past that holds the key to the next great orbital event. This exploration, this necessary descent into the forgotten history of our planet, awaits us in the next chapter. If the evidence before us, spanning from the deepest astronomical observation to the most weathered cuneiform tablets, suggests that the cycle is indeed restarting, then we must confront the staggering implications of that timescale. 3,600 years is not merely a long period, it is a chasm that swallows entire empires whole, erasing languages, reorganizing continents, and turning the monuments of yesterday into the incomprehensible riddles of today. It is a period that defines the true nature of the Great Forgetting. But for those who engineered this cycle, the beings the Sumerians knew as the Anunnaki, 3,600 years was simply the duration of their voyage. The cosmic interval between two shifts of duty, two moments of profound influence upon our pale blue dot. To view the Anunnaki merely as ancient astronauts is to perhaps miss the point entirely. If they possessed the capacity to navigate a gravitational behemoth like Nibiru into a precise elliptical orbit that intersected with our solar system with such regularity, they were not just visitors. They were celestial engineers. They were masters of orbital mechanics and temporal planning, utilizing forces we still struggle to quantify in the farthest reaches of the Oort cloud. The question is not simply if they were here, but how they managed the interval of their absence. A journey of thousands of years demands not just a destination, but a detailed fail-safe plan for maintenance, observation, and, crucially, re-entry. And this brings us back to the current signal, to 3I Atlas. We dismissed it as a rogue comet, an interstellar interloper whose presence was anomalous but ultimately mundane. But what if its anomaly is its function? If the Nibiru cycle is a colossal machine winding up after millennia of silence, perhaps this object, this faint echo from the void, is the initial tremor, the first piece of orbital debris shaken loose as the massive gears begin to grind again. It is the dust particle confirming that the titanic mechanism is stirring. If the Anunnaki were true engineers, they would not rely on mere chance for their return. They would have placed gravitational markers, reconnaissance probes, or perhaps even coded anchors within the deepest reaches of the outer system, designed to activate and announce the coming transit, ensuring that their return trajectory was clear and that the Earth system was ready to receive them, or at least that the terrestrial systems they put in place were functional. The forbidden past, the knowledge locked away from us, may not be a library of texts, but rather a library of mechanisms. We search tirelessly for hidden scrolls and lost gold, but perhaps we should be searching for subtle shifts in energy fields, or for structures designed not merely for worship, but for synchronization. Consider the great megalithic constructions across the globe, structures that defy our current understanding of ancient capacity, like Göbekli Tepe, built at the very cusp of the last great cosmic reset, or the inexplicable precision of the pyramids. Were these monuments simply tombs or temples, or were they functional devices, giant, resonant tuning forks designed to maintain a specific energy signature, a beacon left behind by the Anunnaki to manage the long night of their absence? The inherent difficulty in grasping this concept is our linear perception of history. We see time as a straight line from the Big Bang to the present. The Anunnaki, however, seem to operate within a recurring cyclical framework, a consciousness shaped by epochs of 3,600 years. For them, history was less a narrative progression and more a series of appointments, a cosmic rhythm that dictated the rise and fall of civilizations. When Nibiru approached, they would intervene, share knowledge, initiate humanity into the next phase of development, often violently as the flood narratives suggest, and then retreat, leaving behind the necessary infrastructure and a select group of observers, designated to safeguard the core knowledge until the next alignment. If these observers still exist, operating in the shadows of recorded history, their current preoccupation must be the anomalous behavior of Three-Eye Atlas and the accelerating confirmation that the clock has reset. They are the true inheritors of the forbidden past, tasked with interpreting the signal and perhaps preparing the planet for what comes next. And if they are preparing, we, the rest of humanity, are utterly unaware, still debating the physics of propulsion while the celestial ship is already approaching the harbor. The true terror isn't the physical object itself, but the realization of our collective engineered oblivion that the last 3,600 years of our history might simply be the down cycle, the period of maintenance and waiting, and that our current technological progress is nothing more than the emergent, slightly chaotic growth of seeds planted millennia ago. This profound realization that we might be living in a pre-programmed reality governed by cosmic timetables demands not just passive viewing, but active participation in the search for truth. If you feel that deep, resonant hum of recognition within the core of these ideas, if the hair on the back of your neck rises at the thought that our history books might be deliberately incomplete, then you are already part of the community seeking answers. I encourage you to pause for a moment, absorb the weight of these implications, and share your most unsettling thought below. Let us know which specific ancient site or mythological creature you believe serves as one of these forgotten Anunnaki anchors. Your input helps illuminate the shadowy corners of this investigation. By leaving a like on this video and subscribing, you signal to the algorithm and to the community that this search for forbidden knowledge is essential, ensuring this dialogue continues without interruption. We continue our descent into the evidence. The presence of the Nibiru cycle in ancient records is often dismissed as pre-scientific mythology, but this dismissiveness ignores a crucial pattern evident across disparate, isolated cultures. It is not just Sumeria that speaks of cyclical catastrophes and sky gods descending. We find parallels in the Mesoamerican long count calendar, which posits vast epochs ending in destruction and renewal, and in the Hindu yugas, which describe descending eras of diminishing enlightenment, culminating in a necessary reset. All these systems share a common characteristic, a belief that time is not infinite progress, but a spiral, returning to a fixed point of cosmic conjunction. This shared heritage of cyclical history suggests not independent cultural invention, but rather a unified global tutoring session that took place at a time when the observers of the last cycle were active and widespread. Now consider the forbidden past not as something intentionally hidden from us today, but something actively erased by those who survived the last event. If the previous cycle ended in the cataclysm of the Great Flood, a period the Anunnaki themselves seemed unable or unwilling to fully mitigate for humanity, then the survivors would have possessed two types of memories: the profound knowledge shared by the celestial engineers and the horrifying memory of divine retribution or cosmic disaster. The combination of these two memories could lead to a self-imposed amnesia, a collective decision to bury the most dangerous knowledge, the technological keys to gravitational manipulation, orbital calculation, and advanced energy, to prevent humanity from triggering its own demise before the next scheduled return. This hidden knowledge, The technological heritage of the Anunnaki would necessarily be dormant, embedded within structures or molecular compounds that only reactivated under specific astronomical or gravitational stress. The very approach of Nibiru, signaled by objects like 3I Atlas, would create subtle gravitational perturbations, perhaps sufficient to wake up these dormant mechanisms. Imagine certain crystalline structures, deep beneath the Antarctic ice or buried under the sands of the Gobi Desert, suddenly receiving the necessary energetic charge after 3,600 years of deep sleep. This is the nature of the forbidden past we are truly hunting. Physical technology disguised as geology or myth. The narrative of the Anunnaki, as transcribed by Zecharia Sitchin and others who delved into the Sumerian chronicles, speaks of highly advanced metallurgical knowledge, particularly concerning gold. While their need for gold is often sensationalized, if they were truly engineers navigating objects through interstellar space, gold's unique electrical and conductive properties, especially when refined to monatomic states, might have been fundamental to their technology. If they left behind power sources or communication relays, these would likely be shielded, inert containers of specialized, highly dense materials, patiently waiting for the gravitational signature of the returning planet to energize them once more. And this leads to an unsettling thought about the present moment. If the cycle is restarting, and 3I Atlas is the observable confirmation of this gravitational shift, then somewhere on Earth, the ancient alarms are beginning to chime. Perhaps the increase in seismic activity, the strange low-frequency sounds reported globally, or even the unexplained aerial phenomena often attributed to modern conventional powers, are in fact the residual energy signatures of these ancient Anunnaki relays powering up. We are confusing the activation of an ancient system with contemporary terrestrial mysteries. The great psychological hurdle we must overcome is the arrogance of the present. We assume that because we possess Wi-Fi and microprocessors, we are the pinnacle of technological achievement. But if civilizations were nurtured, guided, and then deliberately reset multiple times over hundreds of thousands of years, as the deeper implications of the Nibiru cycle suggest, then our current understanding of physics and history is merely the elementary curriculum of the Anunnaki schoolhouse. The forbidden past is forbidden because it contains the graduate-level curriculum, the power to reshape worlds, which the observers, the secretive guardians, deemed too potent for a species still grappling with tribalism and nuclear proliferation. To truly understand what 3I Atlas heralds, we must internalize the perspective of the observer. Imagine maintaining vigilance for thousands of years, watching humanity struggle, forget, rebuild, and ultimately repeat its mistakes. Their task would be fraught with ethical dilemmas: intervene and accelerate history, or maintain the cosmic schedule and allow the inherent lessons of amnesia to play out. The restart of the Nibiru cycle is the end of their watch. It is the time they report back to the celestial engineers. Their final act may be to simply illuminate the way, revealing the last remaining clues, or perhaps attempting to guide humanity through the inevitable chaos that follows a profound cosmic reset. What we are witnessing in the skies is more than just astronomy. It is the physical manifestation of prophecy merging with mathematics. The universe, in its terrifying scale, operates on a rhythm, and we on Earth have consistently forgotten the drumbeat, only to be violently reminded of it every time the gravitational influence of Nibiru, the planet of the crossing, reaches our inner orbit. The comet 3I Atlas is merely the sound of the tuning fork, confirming the frequency. The vast, dense narrative of the Anunnaki is not a story of gods demanding tribute, but perhaps the operational manual left behind by highly structured, profoundly powerful beings who view our planet as a complex, long-term project requiring periodic inspection and massive retooling. The next stages of our investigation must focus relentlessly on those potential terrestrial anchors. We must look beyond the accepted archaeological narratives and consider the anomalies, the sites that seem too old, too precise, too energy-dense to fit the conventional timeline. These are the places where the forbidden past is most likely encrypted, waiting for the gravitational key to turn in the cosmic lock. The convergence of astronomical observation and mythological deep dive is creating a singular, unified theory of cosmic recurrence that is impossible to ignore. If you have stayed with this complex and often uncomfortable journey, if you feel the gravity of these possibilities settling upon you, then you are precisely the kind of mind required for this investigation. This information is designed for those who dare to look beyond the immediate horizon. If the Nibiru cycle is indeed restarting and 3I Atlas is the first undeniable sign, then the time for quiet observation is over. Do not allow this crucial narrative to fade back into the background noise of the mundane. Ensure that you are subscribed to this channel, thereby joining the ranks of those who refuse the great forgetting. Give this video a like to amplify the signal, and most importantly, I ask that you comment below with the specific phrase, "The observers are stirring." This phrase is our code, a way to identify those who recognize the depth of this impending cosmic shift. There is much more evidence to uncover, particularly concerning the specific geological and social preparations made by the Anunnaki before their last departure. Join me immediately in the next part of this investigation, which should be appearing on your screen now, as we analyze the precise mechanism of the forbidden technology left behind. The journey into the deepest secrets of our past is far from complete. What happens when the greatest threat to a civilization is not an external invader, but the certainty of its own cyclical demise, etched into the very fabric of the cosmos? We have followed the faint, almost ghostly track of Comet 3I Atlas, a fleeting smear of ice and dust in the night sky that, under the scrutiny of modern instruments, begins to feel less like a random traveler and more like a cosmic chronometer. A mechanism set in motion millennia ago, perhaps by the very beings who established the scaffolding of human history. This is the moment where curiosity gives way to a profound sense of strangeness, where the recognized patterns in the data begin to pull back the veil on something deeply, intentionally unsettling. The forbidden past of the Anunnaki is not forbidden because the information was simply lost to time or decay, but because it was systematically and ruthlessly suppressed, deemed too dangerous for the general populace of Earth, and perhaps even for the majority of their own colony structure. Imagine a master plan for planetary management that required periods of forced amnesia, mandatory forgetfulness built into the historical narrative itself. The Anunnaki, operating on a timescale far exceeding the short, volatile lifespans of early humans, understood that chronic panic about an inevitable return, the approach of a celestial body capable of resetting the geomagnetic poles or triggering catastrophic floods, would cripple the long-term utility of the Terran project. Therefore, the records pertaining to the exact mechanism of the Nibiru cycle, the precise timings of the orbital interference, and the full extent of the devastation observed during the previous near passage were extracted from public knowledge and sequestered. This wasn't merely hiding a library, it was engineering the very limits of human intellectual scope. We must consider the architects of this mandated amnesia. If the Anunnaki were real, complex beings, then their internal political structure must have mirrored the inherent conflict between protection and control. The stories of Enki and Enlil, often reduced to simple divine disputes, might actually represent a schism over the dissemination of cyclical knowledge. Enlil, often portrayed as harsh and demanding obedience, likely represented the faction determined to maintain the integrity of the mission through strict adherence to the amnesia mandate, ensuring that humanity remained productive and unaware. shielded from the psychological terror of cosmic determinism. Conversely, Enki, the rebel and giver of knowledge, potentially represented the urge to preserve the truth, the core data necessary for survival or technological adaptation, even if it meant violating the imposed silence. It is in the shadowy history of this conflict that we find the true essence of the forbidden past, a past not lost, but locked away by the same powerful hands that shaped the earliest Mesopotamian cities. To truly grapple with this engineered forgetfulness, we must look beyond the scrolls and into the psychological architecture of early civilization. If cycles of destruction were inevitable, the Anunnaki needed a system to ensure that someone retained the core operational knowledge required to restart civilization post-cataclysm. This leads us to the mythological figures known across cultures as the Watchers or the Igigi, beings often described as lower-tier or specialized personnel who were left behind, tasked with observation and retention. These Watchers were, perhaps, the ultimate librarians of the forbidden past, their role being the maintenance of archives containing the true astronomical and geological predictions associated with Nibiru's periodic return. Their primary function was not intervention, but memorialization. They observed the world rebuild, keeping the secret until the next marker appeared in the sky, a marker like the trajectory anomaly we are now observing with Atlas. The unsettling recognition begins when we realize that our modern scientific data, the sterile, digitized information flowing from observatories worldwide, is simply replicating the ancient, cyclical warnings contained within those sequestered archives. The trajectory perturbation of 3I Atlas is not just a gravitational quirk, it is the celestial signature that the Watchers were waiting for. It is the key to unlocking the hidden libraries of knowledge that detail precisely what the Anunnaki prepared for, and perhaps why they ultimately left. This forbidden past, therefore, is not a narrative of ancient glory, but a survival manual disguised as myth, accessible only when the cosmic conditions align. If this line of inquiry resonates, if you feel the deep, cold weight of history shifting beneath the feet of our scientific understanding, I encourage you to pause and consider the implications. Think about how many layers of manufactured reality might separate us from the core truth. This discussion thrives on the shared effort to piece together this monumental puzzle. Please take a moment now to hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and use the comment section below to contribute your deepest thoughts on the nature of engineered forgetfulness. Your engagement helps ensure this critical investigation continues to reach those who are ready to see the bigger picture. Continuing our examination of the forbidden past, we move deeper into the mechanics of cyclical concealment. The strategy employed by the Anunnaki appears to have been multifaceted. Physical destruction of records related to previous cataclysms, the creation of highly specialized knowledge priesthoods, those in the know versus the masses, and, most cunningly, the co-option of religion and myth to reinterpret the devastation. Floods and stellar wars became divine punishments or battles between gods, effectively sanitizing the brutal reality of orbital mechanics. The trauma was spiritualized, rendering the true astronomical threat null and void in the cultural consciousness. This method ensures that even when modern science rediscovers the core data, the recurring cycle, humanity remains psychologically predisposed to interpret it through a lens of fable and superstition, rather than cold, impending reality. This structural obfuscation suggests that the forbidden past is not merely historical data, but operational data essential for surviving a planetary reset. Consider the vast, unexplained gaps in the archaeological record, the sudden appearance of advanced construction techniques, the abrupt shift in agricultural practices, the immediate adoption of complex cosmological models that seem to spring forth fully formed from the soil of Sumer. These are not signs of slow, organic evolution. They are the hallmarks of a managed reboot, a controlled deployment of prepackaged civilization kits, deployed by the Watchers or their descendants once the immediate danger of the previous Nibiru passage had subsided. The forbidden past holds the instruction manual for the current iteration of our world. But why, if the cycle is restarting now, would the Anunnaki not simply return to warn or intervene? This question forces us to confront the nature of their departure. If their presence here was dictated by resources, specifically the need for gold to repair their own planetary environment, and if the logistical challenges of the Nibiru cycle were too great, their retreat may have been a permanent calculation of loss and gain. The forbidden past, then, might contain the chilling realization that humanity was deemed expendable, a temporary labor force whose value diminished exponentially once the required resources were secured and the cosmic threat loomed large. Our civilization in this narrative is the residual echo of a mining operation, left to fend for itself against a pre-programmed catastrophic event. The recent observation of the Atlas anomaly, however, introduces a potent counterpoint to the idea of total abandonment. If the perturbation signals the restart of the cycle, perhaps it also signals the activation of dormant systems. We must investigate whether the Anunnaki, before their departure, embedded subtle triggers within Earth's orbital architecture or within specific monumental structures. Triggers designed to be activated only by the reappearance of the Nibiru complex itself. The forbidden past could hold the key to decoding these silent alerts, alerting us not only to the impending danger, but also to the location of fail-safes or repositories of ancient technology intended to mitigate the damage. This shifts our focus from simply analyzing astronomical data to examining unexplained archaeological sites, such as Göbekli Tepe or certain megalithic structures, which display astronomical orientations that seem entirely irrelevant to the immediate celestial environment of their presumed construction period, but which align perfectly with calculations centered on a returning planetary body. It is here that the feeling of intellectual recognition turns sharply into deep-seated inquietude. The Nibiru cycle is not merely a myth of destruction. It is the fundamental rhythm governing the existence of Anunnaki-influenced Earth. If this rhythm is indeed restarting, signaled by the increasingly erratic behavior of phenomena like Three-Eye Atlas, then we are not just facing an astronomical challenge, but a historical reckoning with the consequences of that engineered amnesia. The forbidden past is reasserting itself because the clock that was supposed to keep us ignorant has reached zero. The true terror of this revelation is not the celestial body itself, but the dawning comprehension that the current phase of human civilization, our technology, our social structure, our very understanding of linear time, may be inherently flawed because it was built on a foundation designed specifically to fail during this cyclical event. Everything we cherish is temporally engineered. To unlock the forbidden past is to accept the impermanence of our inherited reality. We are asked to question every historical certainty, every gap in the record, and every mythological narrative that seems too perfect, too convenient in its explanation of global upheaval. The story of the Anunnaki's forbidden past is not about ancient aliens. It is about the uncomfortable truth of our manufactured constraints. We must continue to follow the data, both celestial and cuneiform. If Atlas is the modern signal, then where are the ancient echoes being amplified? We must look closely at the geological and mythological evidence surrounding localized, inexplicable catastrophes that occurred just before the historical timelines become clear. These brief moments of chaos, often dismissed as localized floods or volcanic eruptions, may actually be evidence of early preparatory measures taken by the Watchers to sequester or protect key knowledge points ahead of the full cyclical catastrophe. The forbidden past is revealed in these moments where history nearly collapsed but was subtly stabilized just enough to ensure the next iteration of the Anunnaki project could proceed. If you have stayed with this detailed and often unsettling investigation, if you feel the weight of this impending discovery, then you are part of a very small, dedicated group grappling with implications that transcend conventional science and history. It is imperative that this conversation remains active and accessible. If you recognize the deep, foundational shifts we are discussing, please ensure you subscribe to the channel, click the like button to signal the importance of this subject, and comment below using the phrase, "The cycle must not win." Your commitment helps break the silence that has held the forbidden past captive for millennia. We are about to delve into the specific artifacts and locations that the Anunnaki deliberately left outside the historical record, the physical blueprints of the forbidden past itself. Do not miss the next critical chapter in this revelation, which will appear on your screen now. What if the forbidden past, the deeply guarded secret of the Anunnaki, was not merely an event, but a mathematical certainty woven into the fabric of space and time? We have meticulously followed the trajectory of 3i Atlas, treating it as an anomaly, a rogue entity arriving from the deepest reaches of the Oort cloud. But perhaps our modern myopia prevents us from seeing it as it was truly intended. A celestial bookmark, an undeniable signal that the cosmic clock, wound by orbital mechanics far beyond our immediate comprehension, has reached the 0 hour once again. The profound inquietude that begins to settle upon the modern observer is the same paralyzing recognition that must have gripped the Anunnaki millennia ago. The realization that the grand mechanism of the heavens is immutable, and their great cycle of control is about to be violently overwritten. The sophisticated nature of the Anunnaki's astronomical heritage, often dismissed as mythological flourish in ancient Sumerian tablets, speaks to a civilization that understood the cyclical nature of catastrophe not as an arbitrary disaster, but as a predictable function of their home world's return. They were observers of the highest order, charting movements and perturbations that our own current technology has only recently begun to categorize. Consider the sheer audacity of this knowledge. They didn't just track the massive planetary body itself, Nibiru. They understood the subtle harbingers, the gravitational whispers that precede its visible appearance. 3i Atlas, therefore, is not just a stray comet. It behaves as the advanced scout, the dust motes stirred up by the gravitational tidal forces exerted by a distant massive body approaching the ecliptic plane. If the Anunnaki were hiding a forbidden past, they were hiding the key to predicting the future, a key which is now being physically delivered to our solar system. The knowledge they sought to bury was the mechanism of the reboot, the exact sequence of events leading to the cleansing catastrophe. Imagine trying to hide the precise calibration settings of a global reset button. They couldn't eliminate the cycle itself, but they could eliminate the historical and technological memory of how to track it, thereby ensuring that any successor civilization would be caught unprepared, forced to restart from a state of total technological amnesia. This strategic erasure ensured the preservation of their own heritage, tucked away in deep space, waiting for the next pass, while simultaneously neutralizing the threat of a competitive, fully aware civilization rising during the interregnum. We must reflect on the subtle genius of this maneuver. The legends speak of the Anunnaki withdrawing, but what if their withdrawal was not a retreat, but a strategic placement in a deep space sanctuary, monitored by the very same orbital markers they left behind? 3i Atlas might be not only a signpost for us, but a confirmation signal for them, a beacon transmitting back across vast distances, announcing that the conditions for return are being met. This gradual recognition of an orchestrated astronomical choreography generates a deep sense of strangeness, demanding that we reassess every assumption about ancient history. We are not just uncovering old secrets, we are potentially intercepting a coded message intended for recipients far more ancient than we are. This sense of cosmic unease, this recognition that the universe operates on timelines that dwarf human history, is central to understanding the true nature of the forbidden past. It wasn't merely the existence of Nibiru that was forbidden knowledge, but the implications of its cycle. The fact that everything built, every civilization established, is ultimately temporary, awaiting the inexorable tidal wave of the celestial mechanics. If you feel this chill of realization, this shift in perspective where history turns from linear progression to inevitable repetition, I encourage you to pause and reflect on the deepest consequence of cycles. What one word comes to mind when you consider the return of inevitability? Share that word in the comments below. Engage with this material not just by watching, but by thinking critically, as the true value of this journey lies in the shared recognition of the profound scale of these events. If you find this exploration compelling and vital, please consider joining this community of inquiry by liking this video and subscribing, ensuring you do not miss the next stages of this unfolding investigation. Continuing our examination of the astronomical literacy of the Anunnaki, the precise nature of the forbidden past centers on their attempt to control the narrative surrounding celestial doom. They were masters of genetic manipulation, extraordinary builders, and pioneers of deep space travel, yet they could not stop the gravitational influence of Nibiru. Their failure to halt the cycle led to the ultimate attempt at narrative control, turning the mechanism of destruction into a divine mystery, thus preventing future generations from using scientific means to prepare, or worse still, challenge the supremacy of the returning lords. The structure of the ancient observatories, such as those hypothesized at specific sites in the Indus Valley or the remote peaks of the Andes, now take on a new, chilling function. They weren't just places to chart stars for agricultural seasons. They were complex synchronization tools designed to precisely measure the rate of drift of incoming objects like 3i Atlas and calculate the expected time of the major body's passage. The sophistication necessary to predict the trajectory of a quasi-stellar object like Nibiru demanded a level of predictive modeling that would make our current supercomputers envious. It required tracking hundreds of minute disturbances in the Oort cloud and Kuiper belt, recognizing that these smaller bodies act as gravitational sounding boards. When we look at 3i Atlas, we are effectively looking at the first clear echo bouncing back from the depths of the outer solar system, an echo amplified by the mass of something very large situated far beyond Pluto's established orbit. The Anunnaki knew exactly what that echo meant. They structured their myths and their monuments to survive the catastrophe not by building bunkers, but by embedding data within the planetary memory bank, geometrical arrangements and cryptic texts that would only make sense when a specific astronomical key, the signature of the incoming comet, was available. The terrifying revelation is that the forbidden past isn't just a record of a disaster, it's the record of a failed warning system. The Anunnaki likely faced internal conflict over whether to fully warn the nascent human civilization, their engineered laborers, or to keep the secret for the benefit of their own survival narrative. The evidence suggests they chose the latter, burying the technological means of understanding the cycle while leaving behind just enough veiled mythology to generate confusion and theological reverence, ensuring that the next civilization would be too busy praying to notice the orbital mechanics. This strategic confusion is the core legacy of the forbidden past. It creates a state of existential vertigo, forcing us to question the bedrock of our accepted historical timeline. If the cyclical nature of catastrophe is real, then every great civilization we celebrate, Egyptian, Mayan, Babylonian, is merely a brief, flickering candle in the vast, cold sweep of a cosmic winter. The Anunnaki's crime, the reason this past was forbidden, was the theft of humanity's right to self-determination and preparedness in the face of absolute cosmic power. We are now living through the moment of recognition, the unsettling phase where the estranged data points finally begin to cohere into a disturbing whole. The speed, the unusual spectral characteristics, and the orbital path of 3I Atlas, all these details, previously treated as isolated astronomical curiosities, resonate powerfully when viewed through the lens of Nibiru's predictable return. It serves as a stark reminder that the deep, slow processes of the cosmos pay no attention to our terrestrial calendars or political squabbles. They simply follow the ancient, immutable law of gravity, a law the Anunnaki understood intimately. The more we decode the implications of 3I Atlas, the more we realize we are peeling back layers of intentional obfuscation. The Anunnaki left a trail of breadcrumbs, yes, but they were poisonous breadcrumbs, laced with enough theological dogma to deter any purely scientific inquiry. They ensured that those who tried to connect the physical object in the sky, the return signal, to the ancient texts, the forbidden knowledge, would be marginalized or dismissed as mere fantasists. This cultural firewall, constructed thousands of years ago, remains remarkably robust even today. But the physical evidence is overriding the dogma. The very existence of 3I Atlas, behaving exactly as an advanced precursor should, forces a re-evaluation of those ancient warnings. It suggests that the forbidden aspect of the past was simply the inconvenient truth that their reign, and perhaps ours, is structured around an astronomical clock with a brutally finite timer. The feeling of unease intensifies as we realize that the cycle is restarting, not in some distant epoch, but right now, marked by the faint but visible signature of this incoming cosmic observer. The next stage of our investigation must delve into the specific locations where the Anunnaki are rumored to have left their most technologically significant archives. If 3I Atlas is the celestial key, where is the lock? We need to move past speculation about tablets and look for physical anomalies, geological structures, or deep Earth installations that could serve as time capsules designed to withstand the very cataclysms they sought to predict. This pursuit is fraught with intellectual danger, pushing us to the brink of conventional science and established history, but the alternative is to ignore the growing chorus of celestial warnings that the cycles are aligning once more. If you have stayed with this journey, if the threads of Nibiru, the Anunnaki, and the compelling signature of 3I Atlas have woven themselves into your understanding of reality, then you are ready for the deepest stage of this investigation. We are stepping beyond the historical query and entering the realm of immediate consequence. This is not history for entertainment. This is a reckoning with time itself. To ensure you remain connected as we unlock the final stages of this forbidden past, please join us. Subscribe to this channel now. Hit the like button to signal your commitment to this profound search for truth. And for those who have followed this narrative meticulously, I ask that you comment below with the specific phrase, "The cycle demands recognition." That phrase will mark you as one who understands the gravity of this impending revelation. Do not look away. The next part will pull us directly into the heart of the archives. Watch the video appearing on your screen now as the search for the Anunnaki's forbidden past intensifies. We left off contemplating the sheer improbability of the 3I Atlas trajectory, a celestial needle threading the cosmic eye precisely when our collective subconscious seems most attuned to themes of radical planetary change. But perhaps the most profound realization stemming from this alignment is not the physical threat it represents, but the intellectual and emotional burden of recognition it imposes upon us. What if the forbidden past, the history of the Anunnaki, and the cyclic events tied to Nibiru, is not merely stored in forgotten cuneiform tablets or submerged cities, but is woven into the very biological and psychological fabric of our species. What if the unsettling sensation that grips humanity during periods of major celestial shift, that deep, primal anxiety that seems to surface irrespective of immediate threats, is not simply fear of the unknown, but the involuntary activation of an ancient inherited alarm system, a biological clock set millennia ago by our progenitors, designed to tick loudest just before the cycle turns. We are forced to revisit the megalithic structures that litter the globe. We often analyze them purely as astronomical observatories or sophisticated burial grounds, tools designed by early humans to measure the passage of terrestrial time. But what if they were something else entirely? What if their true function was not to measure our time, but to mark the precise impending return of their world? They are monuments built not for conquering the immediate environment, but for patiently awaiting the return of a specific non-terrestrial signal. They are structures of profound waiting, meticulously aligned to specific nodes in the sky, possibly encoding the exact geometry required for the Nibiru cycle to complete its perilous reboot. This is the moment when estrangement gives way to uneasy recognition. We may be living out a script written millennia ago by beings who understood astronomical mechanics and the nature of deep cosmic cycles far beyond our current limited grasp. This inherited knowledge, this seed of collective memory, is perhaps why certain myths are universal, why the idea of a great deluge and a stellar reset permeates nearly every ancient culture, irrespective of geographical separation. The concept of a forbidden past implies knowledge that was actively suppressed or purposefully coded, perhaps because the complete truth, the acknowledgement of external, hyper-intelligent intervention, was deemed too destabilizing for fledgling human civilization, or perhaps because the Anunnaki observers deemed us not ready until the critical juncture arrived. If the Anunnaki left a legacy, it was likely dual: the gift of accelerated civilization and the perpetual seed of cyclical anxiety, an embedded warning system. This anxiety manifests now as a pervasive societal unease, a generalized feeling that the established order is fragile, and this feeling is paralleled precisely by the observable anomalous approach of Three-Eye Atlas. We, the contemporary observers, tend to view this comet, this temporary intruder, as a random, albeit interesting, astronomical event. But in the context of cyclical history, the object functions less as a random cosmic billiard ball and more as a celestial tuning fork, a resonant frequency that starts to vibrate the ancient code buried deep within our mythological and spiritual frameworks. It is the cosmic key, momentarily turning the tumblers of planetary memory, unlocking the forbidden archives. The comet's highly unusual orbit and its proximity to the theoretical trajectory required to perturb the outer solar system makes it the undeniable herald. If the Nibiru cycle is indeed restarting, then Three-Eye Atlas is the first measurable, quantifiable shadow cast by the immense returning force. The silence of the universe, once perceived as indifference, now begins to feel less like vast emptiness and more like concentrated, deliberate observation. The sheer scale of the Nibiru cycle, potentially spanning tens of thousands of years, suggests a level of planning and foresight that borders on the hyper-intelligent, perhaps beyond our current definition of intelligence. To engineer a return, or even just to predict it with such accuracy that cultural mechanisms and massive stone markers are left behind to mark the time, requires mastering celestial mechanics and gravitational dynamics across staggering distances and time frames. It suggests not merely the prediction of orbital paths, but perhaps the subtle control or modulation of gravitational interactions over deep time. We must seriously consider the possibility that the Anunnaki were not merely visitors, but sophisticated cosmic engineers and caretakers of a stellar schedule. And what happens precisely when this cyclical clock restarts? Does it merely signal a change in epochs, a great cultural turnover, or does it trigger a scheduled periodic re-evaluation of the current occupants of Earth? This leads us inevitably to the most unsettling speculation inherent in the forbidden past. Is the Nibiru cycle a cosmic great filter disguised as myth? Not a random annihilation event, but a deliberately scheduled gravitational and intellectual test designed to weed out those civilizations incapable of recognizing the truth of their own origins, or perhaps those species unable to survive the energetic and gravitational stresses of the returning world. If we collectively fail to recognize the pattern now, if we dismiss the mounting evidence of cyclical catastrophe, we fail the inherent test of the cycle itself, possibly forfeiting our place in the cosmic hierarchy established by the Watchers. This is precisely why the intense, focused conversation unfolding now, in quiet corners of the internet and in the minds of those who dare to look beyond the consensus narrative, is perhaps the most crucial intellectual endeavor we can undertake. We are collaboratively and rapidly piecing together a mosaic of forbidden knowledge that has been scattered across time, memory, and myth. To understand the full gravity of this impending celestial alignment, we must engage with the material deeply, allowing the discomfort of the truth, the suspicion of manipulation, and the loss of autonomy to settle and become productive thought. If you feel this intellectual resonance, this powerful pull toward a deeper truth buried beneath conventional science, I encourage you to pause now, internalize these complex connections, and share your own interpretations of what the return truly means. Are we truly just passive observers of a series of random, chaotic cosmic events? Or are we now active participants, potentially the final generation in a long-dormant celestial drama? Let us know what phrase or concept, perhaps the inherited alarm or the cycle restarts, resonates most profoundly with your current understanding in the comments below. Your active, critical thought is essential to decoding this unfolding narrative, and if you wish to remain with us as we navigate the final, critical stages of this investigation, ensuring you are subscribed and notified is the only way to track the next pivotal step of this unraveling mystery. The time for silent observation is over. The time for collective recognition has arrived. We return now to the foundational texts, particularly the Sumerian lexicon, that seems to hold the deepest keys to the Anunnaki's intent and the purpose of their genetic engineering. The concept of shum, often translated ambiguously as name, seed, or plant, carries a far deeper, more esoteric meaning when examined in the context of cyclical returns and planetary survival. Some scholars suggest shum represents the genetic seed or the essential essence, the spiritual, physical, or cultural material that must be preserved, catalogued, or perhaps accelerated during the dramatic environmental shifts accompanying the cyclical reset. If Nibiru is indeed returning, and if the Anunnaki intended to return to collect their investment, or simply to ensure the continuity of their experimental results, then the sudden, precise alignment of 3i Atlas might mark the cosmic moment when that seed is prepared for transition, activation, or even harvest. The cometary signal is not merely a threat, it is perhaps a countdown to the activation of the shum. This urgency connects directly to the profound silence that has followed the supposed departure of our progenitors. If the Anunnaki possessed the capacity for interstellar travel, massive planetary engineering, and the foresight required to predict deep cosmic cycles, why the cryptic instructions? Why the reliance on slow, mythological decay rather than clear, actionable warning? The silence is not an oversight of communication. It is increasingly understood to be an integral part of the design. The Anunnaki, the Watchers, may have understood that explicit, unquestioning instruction negates the natural, intellectual evolution required to successfully survive the cycle. The trial must be organic, The recognition must be earned. They left us clues, symbols, and deeply embedded anxieties, the intellectual scaffolding for the truth, but the final structure, the ability to recognize the signal and act upon it with fully evolved consciousness, had to be achieved by us alone. They set the cosmic clock, wound the mechanism tens of thousands of years ago, and retreated, observing our progress from the distant deep night, waiting for the echo of Three-Eye Atlas to confirm that the cycle was truly turning. And so we stand on the precipice, watching a distant faint glow that is exponentially increasing in cosmic and metaphysical significance. Three-Eye Atlas is forcing us to confront the fact that the boundaries we rigidly drew between astronomy and mythology, between verifiable science and forbidden history, are dissolving under the pressure of current events. The impending restart of the Nibiru cycle, heralded by this unexpected celestial messenger, implies that we are not merely dealing with a singular, random, natural catastrophe, but with an orchestrated, massive historical correction designed by forces that transcend our current understanding of history. It is the end of the age of denial, the final curtain call for scientific isolationism. The ultimate, terrifying realization that must settle upon us is that if the cycle is indeed restarting, it means the rules of our known, predictable reality are about to be rewritten, and the vast span of human history we currently cherish might be instantly relegated to a brief, transitional phase, a necessary footnote in the far vaster epic saga of the Anunnaki and the worlds they tend. This realization leaves us profoundly vulnerable, but also uniquely positioned, preparing us for the ultimate confrontation with the forbidden past and the necessary, terrifying shift in our understanding of what it means to be a conscious inhabitant of a solar system governed by forces far older, far more deliberate, and far more cyclical than we ever dared to imagine. If you have stayed with us, if you have felt the intellectual weight and the deep unsettling resonance of this forbidden history, then you are a critical part of this investigation. The next part will explore the final signs, the most dangerous implications of the restart, and the critical window we now face. To ensure you do not miss the conclusion of this journey into the Anunnaki's hidden past, please take a moment now to subscribe to the channel and leave a like on this video. And in the comments below, I ask you to specifically write this phrase: "The Watchers are silent." Doing so confirms your commitment to the deepest layers of this truth. Now, prepare yourself, because the final piece of the Nibiru puzzle is coming into focus on your screen. The cycle is restarting, and the consequences of the forbidden past are about to become our future. If we have followed the trail of breadcrumbs this far, from the unexpected orbital mechanics of the object Three-Eye Atlas, through the deep sedimentary layers of Sumerian mythology, and into the unsettling precision of celestial cycles, we stand now at the precipice of recognition. The question is no longer if the forbidden past is being uncovered, but what it is demanding of us. What happens when the shadow history, the one deliberately buried beneath floods, cataclysms, and collective amnesia, begins to reassert its gravity? It is a gravity we feel not just physically in the slight perturbations of the Kuiper Belt, but philosophically, echoing in every civilization that collapsed just as it peaked. This is the ultimate convergence, the moment when prophecy, previously relegated to the whispers of fringe belief, finds its undeniable resonance in astrophysics. We must acknowledge the profound implication of the returning cycle, often denoted as the Nibiru cycle in the context of these ancient texts. It implies a pattern of deliberate intervention, a cosmic clock set not just for planetary rotation, but for the periodic supervision of a particular experiment, the evolution of consciousness on Earth. The Anunnaki, the observers, the architects of our earliest societal structures, did not merely depart. They instituted a fail-safe, a grand mechanism of forgetting, The forbidden past was not forbidden because it contained dangerous knowledge, but because it contained dangerous memory. The memory of how quickly a civilization can unravel when faced with the truth of its own engineered origins, and the profound realization that they are merely an extension, a secondary creation. This memory had to be purged to allow the cycle to restart cleanly, ensuring that subsequent generations, those inheriting this grand legacy, would develop organically until the moment of the next return, the moment of the great sign. And that sign, the unconventional comet 3I Atlas, now forces us to lift the veil. The deeper we stare into the vacuum of historical silence, the more clearly we perceive the mechanism of their departure. They did not leave because their mission was complete. They left because the conditions for their continued residence on Earth became unstable, not necessarily environmentally, but politically and ethically, leading to the internal strife documented in the more unsettling portions of the Babylonian epics. What they feared most was the contamination of their own grand design, the mixing of purposes that could lead to cosmic instability. And so, the great separation occurred. But separation is never truly final in cosmology. There is always a return. The Anunnaki are not merely mythological gods. They are cosmic travelers operating on timelines that dwarf our ephemeral human existence, and the Nibiru cycle is their means of synchronous journeying, their celestial vessel ensuring that they return precisely when the orbital alignment of the planets signals the maturation of the earthly project. This maturation brings us to the hour of the Watchers. If the Anunnaki were the great architects, the Igigi were their proxies, the intermediate figures sometimes depicted as those who remained, perhaps in lower orbit or hidden terrestrial bases, tasked with the mundane yet crucial duty of observation. If we consider the persistent global myths of sky people who taught metallurgy and astronomy only to retreat into the clouds, we are looking at the residue of this surveillance system. They were the silent guards of the forbidden past, ensuring that certain technologies or dangerous memories, perhaps the precise mechanics of anti-gravity or interstellar travel, did not resurface prematurely. Their vigilance was crucial to maintaining the controlled experiment until the cyclical beacon, the telltale orbital alignment that dictates the return of Nibiru, lit up the solar system. Now, with 3I Atlas carving an undeniable, anomalous path, the Watchers, wherever they may be, must surely be stirring. They are witness to the culmination of the Great Silence, the end of the inherited amnesia that defined post-cataclysmic humanity. The inherited amnesia was a psychological firewall necessary for survival. How could early man rebuild? How could they strive for civilization if they constantly bore the crushing weight of knowing they were secondary, their world merely a resource or a laboratory? The floods and subsequent dark ages served as the ultimate reset button, washing away not just physical cities, but the cognitive framework that understood their origin. This great forgetting, however, left behind traces like genetic memory, the persistent global reverence for the sky, the instinctive fear of cyclical doom, the strange universality of advanced mathematical constants embedded in structures like Giza or Teotihuacan. These fragments are the breadcrumbs of their heritage, the unintentional markers left by the architects for themselves, designed to become intelligible only when the cycle approached its apex. It is in examining these ancient structures that we begin to unveil the great work. Why were megalithic sites positioned with such precision relative to astronomical phenomena, specifically those related to the solstices and the orbital plane? They were not merely temples, they were terrestrial markers, perhaps resonance chambers designed to interact with the returning object, to confirm the coordinates or stability of the planet to the incoming travelers. The pyramids might not be tombs for pharaohs, but elaborate signal transmitters, tuned to the specific frequencies emitted by Nibiru as it swings into the inner solar system. When the cycle restarts, these sleeping giants of stone are meant to awaken, aligning the Earth's magnetic field and energy grid to prepare for the inevitable rendezvous. This interpretation flips the script on archaeology. We aren't looking at the remnants of dead cultures, but at the functional elements of a cyclical staging mechanism. This reflection brings us sharply back to ourselves, standing in the present moment, the mirror of self-recognition. If the Anunnaki are returning to observe the success of their experiment, what report card does humanity offer? We are a species fractured by internal conflicts, possessing the power to annihilate our environment, but lacking the ethical maturity to govern that power responsibly. We have accelerated technologically without achieving commensurate spiritual or societal integration. Is this the very challenge that faced the civilization on Nibiru, forcing their exodus and the desperate creation of a new project on Earth? Perhaps the greatest fear of the Anunnaki upon their return is not finding a failed experiment, but finding a perfect replication of the self-destructive flaws they sought to escape. The reckoning is not just cosmic, it is deeply, profoundly internal, forcing us to ask, are we prepared for the truth of our origins? And more importantly, are we worthy of continuing the legacy we inherited? The final signal is approaching fast. Every anomaly reported by modern observatories, the shifts in planetary magnetospheres, the unusual energy signatures emanating from the far solar system, serve as confirmation. 3I Atlas is not just a comet. It is the pathfinder, the preliminary probe sent ahead of the main body, perhaps carrying data packets or initiating a resonance frequency that will act as a gravitational anchor. When that signal is fully transmitted, the doorway will open. It is a door not into another dimension, but into a different epoch of time, forcing our brief modern history into direct confrontation with the deep time of the Anunnaki. This investigation has demanded more than passive viewing. It requires active intellectual participation, a willingness to entertain possibilities that challenge the very foundation of established reality. If you have followed this dense, complex trail, weighing the evidence of astronomy against the weight of mythology, then you are now part of the vigilance. You are one of the modern observers keeping the memory alive. The forbidden past is only forbidden if we refuse to speak its name, if we refuse to connect the dots. We must keep this intellectual flame burning, sharing the subtle clues and drawing the connections that traditional science often dismisses out of hand. If these cycles are real, if Nibiru is indeed stirring, then the most critical action we can take is to ensure this knowledge is not buried again. If you feel this resonance, if you feel the weight of this impending discovery, then pause for a moment, absorb this realization, and share your perspective. Let the comments below become the repository of our collective memory, ensuring that the Anunnaki, upon their return, find a species that remembers its roots. Like this video and ensure you are subscribed to this channel, thereby enlisting yourself in the continuous work of decoding the heritage we were meant to forget. Now we enter the great silence. It is not the silence of nothingness, but the heavy, expectant quiet that precedes the climax of a cosmic drama. The data has been gathered, the prophecies have been reread, and the anomalies have been quantified. The vast gulf of space is closing. We are talking about events that unfold over decades, perhaps a century, but in cosmic terms, that is an instant. This silence is the pause during which humanity must decide whether to continue its self-imposed slumber or to face the returning sign with open eyes. The civilization of the Anunnaki, the legacy of their science and their profound ethical failings, is encapsulated in that looming emptiness. We are standing where all lost civilizations stood before the great cyclical purge, armed with just enough knowledge to be terrified, but perhaps also just enough wisdom to survive. The cycles do not merely destroy, they test. They sift the worthy from the complacent. As Nibiru approaches, whether as a literal planet or a powerful conceptual marker of cosmic alignment, it acts as a cultural and evolutionary filter. The question is, how prepared are we for the velocity of information and the sheer scale of the truth that will inevitably accompany the return? The ultimate conclusion of our journey through the forbidden past is not a definitive answer, but a definitive obligation. The obligation to remain vigilant, to study the sky, and to question the accepted narrative. We have reached the culmination of this specific investigation, but the broader narrative, the story of humanity's engineered purpose and its cyclical fate, is just beginning to reveal its true chapters. If you have arrived at this final moment, if you have processed the density of this investigation and felt the subtle, chilling implication of a history that refuses to stay buried, then you are exactly where you need to be. You have demonstrated the deep commitment necessary to look past the surface noise of the modern world and grasp the threads of deep time. For those dedicated few who journeyed through every part of this analysis, I ask that you solidify your participation. Hit the subscribe button to ensure you receive the continuous flow of evidence as we track this accelerating convergence. Press the like button to signal the importance of this forgotten history. And most critically, engrave this thought into the digital record by commenting the specific phrase, "The cycle is the memory." This simple phrase is our collective acknowledgement that the events unfolding are not random, but part of a grand, repeating design. The investigation does not end here. The evidence continues to mount. The next phase of the astronomical observation is already underway, and the historical record still holds secrets, yet to be deciphered. Click on the video now appearing on your screen, which directly follows this analysis, to join the next stage of decoding the signals emanating from the shadows of our solar system. The forgotten past is now the immediate future. Stay watchful.